Okay, is that yellow mic on? Can y'all hear me back there? Jerry, y'all good back there? Wendell, everything good? Y'all look good, man. Y'all just look good. Y'all look like springtime back there. I think it's all those ladies in those flowery tops they're wearing that makes y'all look springy back there. All right, well, you know what I noticed tonight is that the weather has been very nice and everybody's doing their spring projects, so all y'all came in limping tonight. except for Reba. She came in with beach sand in her hair, but the rest, everybody else came in with kind of a, oh, my shoulder, or oh, my elbow, or oh, my, and it's like, hey, at our age, you can ask somebody how you're doing and you get an organ recital, right? Oh, my kidneys are, oh man, my heart is this, or my lungs are that. So yeah, if your organ recital gets too bad, let us know. We'll put you on the prayer list and we'll pray over it. But it is great to see it. It's great experiencing the beautiful weather, but all the spring cleaning projects and all the yard work that has to be done this time of year is taking its toll on us old folks. So anyway, it is great to see y'all tonight. I was blessed on Monday to have a long lunch with Brother Carl, and just what a wonderful guy he is. Just a great guy. Excited about ministry as much now as I've ever been in the last 40 years of doing this. So I just feel really good about the next few years here at Cannon. I just really feel like we appreciate the work our committee has done. Really think they've done an excellent job, and I think we're really going to enjoy Brother Carl, his family. And when we get later to the prayer list, we prayed over it Monday. They need a house down here in this neck of the woods. Okay, so let's pray on that, and then a million things that have to be done in the transition. So stuff that they have to tie a knot on and leave it, tie a nice bow on it and leave it behind up there in Spartanburg County, and then new things they have to get done down here. So, and then we got we got little, there's several things around here that need tweaking or fixing, like just in our physical plant and things like that, and a lot of things we're going to be getting into. So just be in prayer over that. So anyway, without talking anymore, I do want to get into the lesson. I want to sing, if you'll reach in front of you and grab your hymnal, and there's a couple of little songs that we sing. Mark Blankenship has been the music minister down at the First Baptist Church in Hilton Head, so one of our South Carolina Baptists, but he also was with Lifeway for a long time. But here's a little song he wrote, In the Presence of the Lord. Let's sing that together, and then we'll sing another song. But these, again, like every week, these songs relate to what we're going to be talking about tonight. Let's sing this together. Did I not tell you? Now, wait, stop, Pam. It would help if I told them what number. So, 440. Sorry about that. 440. Here we go. Ready? And there is joy, there is joy, there is joy in the presence of the Lord. There is joy that's full, there is joy that's free. There is joy in the presence of the Lord. There is peace, there is peace. There is peace in the presence of the Lord. There is perfect peace when I rest in Him. There is peace in the presence of the Lord. There is love, there is love. There is love in the presence of the Lord. There is love that's real no matter how I feel. There is love in the presence of the Lord. Stand and sing, stand and sing, stand and sing in the presence of the Lord. Stand and sing your praise to the risen King. Stand and sing in the presence of the Lord. Go back to 287, 287. Another little song we sing around the invitation time. Take my life, lead me, Lord. Let's sing this together. Take my life, lead me, Lord. Take my life, lead me, Lord. Make my life useful to Thee. Take my Take my life, lead me, Lord, make my life useful to thee. Take my life, teach me, Lord, take my life, teach me, Lord, make my life useful to thee. Take my life, teach me, Lord, take my life, teach me, Lord, make my life useful to thee. Here am I, send me, Lord, here am I, send me, Lord, make my life useful to thee. Here am I, send me, Lord, here am I, send me, Lord, make my life useful to thee. Thank you, Gary and Pam. Brother Jerry, ask God to bless our Bible study, please, sir. Amen. Well, in chapter 3, we started getting introduced of Judges. We're in Judges, so take your Bibles and turn to Judges chapter 6. But in chapter 3, we started getting introduced to the 13 judges that we'll be studying. And we got introduced to the first 3, the third of which was just one verse in chapter 3, verse 31, which was Shamgar. Again, Shamgar must have been some sort of farmer. And we found out from the Song of Deborah, we in chapter 4, we got into the next 2, which were women, which were Deborah and Jael. Deborah was a judge that people actually came to. Jael was both of these were moms and housewives that took care of their tents, took care of their families. There's this little note inserted about Jael and her family got disenchanted with the way things were going where they were living, and they just moved out into the wilderness. And so you'd be reading along through there, and you're like, well, so what? What difference does that make? Well, stay tuned, right? Later on, we found out why. When man, all the names are jumping out and around in my head now. But when Sisera was fighting, and Barak was chasing Sisera. Sisera, remember, they had all of these chariots and all of the armament, 900 chariots and pairs of horses and all the weaponry that they could have. And remember, Deborah went to Barak and she said, Barak, I know God wants you to do this. And apparently God had been talking to him. So he said, yeah, you remember what he said? He said, I'm not going to go unless what? You got to go with me. And that's something that here's this man that's going to go handle all of this army business and say, well, Deborah, I'm not going if you don't go with me. But Deborah this was a lady that heard from God. I mean, have you ever known ladies like that just absolutely got a hold of the altar when they prayed, and they really were in touch with God? And that's the way Deborah was. And so people would go to Deborah to decide things under the tree of Deborah and things like that, under the palm tree. And so when Sisera jumps off of one of these mighty chariots he has, and he kind of hid and let the chariot go, and Barak just chased the chariot on down, and then when they all got down to the Kishon, they were all destroyed down there, but what do you know? Here goes Sisera running up through there, and finally there's a tent. And who did that tent belong to? Well, Jael and her family, right? Her husband, her kids, and she said she knew who that was, and or God had revealed it to her or whatever, and she said, hey, come on in here, I'll take care of you. He said, boy, I sure am tired and I'm thirsty. Do you have any cold water for me to drink? And what did she bring him? She brought him some milk and a blankie. I said, warm milk and a blankie. And he laid down. He'd been running. He'd been chased all day long. And he drank the milk, got some, the stomach growling stopped, and as he laid down, you know what she did. She took the tent peg and she fastened, the Bible it says, she fastened him to the ground. And that was some stroke with the hammer while he was asleep. So now when Barak comes wandering around, hey, where is you seen Sisera go by here? She said, come here, let me show you something. And so, yeah, I mean, she just, she pulled back the blankie, and there he was, fastened to the ground with a tent spike through his skull. Well, anyway, all of that, it was in chapter 4. Then we get to chapter 5. And what's cool about chapter 5 is that if Samuel is the writer of Judges, which many believe he was, but if Samuel was the writer of Judges, he did not write chapter 5. What he did was he found this song that Deborah had composed, this poem that Deborah had composed in praising and thanking God for all of the events that had just happened, and he just inserted the whole thing right there as chapter 5, the Song of Deborah, the Song of Praise. It's really cool. It starts the very first thing after God had done a great work. The very first thing that happens in that song is that there is praise. What is our response, or what should be our response for God doing anything in our lives? It should be praise, right? And in this case, it was this poem or through singing that they would sing this song that Deborah wrote. So Samuel, just inserting it, wanted us to have the whole record of what that song was. So she starts with praise. Then she talks about Barak, and then she talks about the victory there. And then she even in her song talks about, in the meantime, what was going on. She talks about Shamgar. And remember, she talks about the fact that the Philistines, and that it had become impossible for the children of Israel to buy and sell. It had become impossible for them to travel in the streets. You know what? As I said last week, it reminded me of those pictures you saw of Times Square during the shutdown of COVID. Like, here's Times Square, the most trafficked intersection in the whole world, and nothing. Like, not a car, not a person. Everything came to a shutdown because of what was being done by the Canaanites to the children of Israel. They had shut down commerce. There was no trading. No traveling. People were afraid. Deborah said in her song that people would have to go the back roads. And whatever happened, we didn't know in chapter 3. The writer of the book of Judges, if it's Samuel, he didn't tell us anything but one verse that Shamgar took an ox goad, took a piece of farm equipment, and slew 600 Philistines, through 600 by himself, 600 Canaanites by himself. And so we don't know what the deal was. But now if you get into the Song of Deborah, you can kind of understand the problems that they were creating and not letting people do the regular things of life. And finally, Shamgar said, that's enough, and he took out 600 of them by himself. So he got the mention in the song. So in Deborah's song are some details that fill in. And then she sings in this song, it's the song about Jael and fastening his head to the tent stake. I often wondered, was that a church song? Did they sing that on Sunday morning about her putting a tent peg through his head? But anyway, that's what's happened behind us. Now we're going to spend I don't know how many weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. Tonight we have 40 verses, and y'all are going, chapter 6. But good news, I'm stopping at verse 24. I don't want to rush too far, but what I want to do tonight, I want us to get to know Gideon, right? Who is Gideon? Now, Gideon takes up chapter 6, 7, and 8 of the book of Judges. So 3 full chapters, several different Bible stories about Gideon and his accomplishments, things that he did. So tonight I just want us to get through verse 24 that lets us get introduced to Gideon. Well, let's look at what I'm going to call the menacing Midianites. The menacing Midianites in verses 1 through 6. We have a problem. The last thing we're told, go back to the little footnote in chapter 5, the last verse in chapter 5, in verse 31, after Deborah's song, the author puts in the little footnote, so let thine, Deborah's song says this, so let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might. That ends Deborah's song. Then the writer puts in this little note, right? What is that little note at the tail end of chapter 5, verse 31? And the land had rest, how long? 40 years. And again, as we've studied week after week, what is the significance of the amount of time called 40 years? It represents one complete generation, 40 years. After we looked at one judge that after he had finished, the land had rest for 80 years, or 2 generations. Okay, so we know that Israel's modus operandi, their MO, was to get everything right and everything goes along for a while. But then, in this case, look at chapter 6, verse 1. And the children of Israel, after one generation again, did what? Did evil. Now, when you look at one generation later, the children of Israel doing evil in just one generation. Why? Who does that fall on? Help me. Parents, leadership, preachers, prophets, for whatever reason, just one generation later. And you guys, man, you watch the news too. You can see that how just from generation, if you want to talk about one generation, okay, go back to 1982. All right, well, we can see how things have deteriorated from 1982 in our nation. But you really want to see deterioration? Let's go 2 generations. Go back to 1942 and look how things were in the United States of America as far as spiritually. You and your neighbors, if somebody didn't go to church on Sunday, that was kind of odd, right? Now, coming out of our cul-de-sac, there might be 1 or 2 other families in there that are getting in their car Sunday when we are. And see, in 80 years, what has happened in just 2 generations in the United States of America. And it's just awful. So the writer lets us know they did evil after this one generation. Now they did evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Bible doesn't just tell us that they had backslidden or they had slipped or they had let some things go. It goes out and tells us how was their behavior. The children of Israel did what? Evil. Man, you got to be doing something pretty rough to be classified as an evil generation, right? There's some evil stuff going on now. Like, who in the world would thought they could be so ugly in front of Supreme Court justices' houses? Like, that's just evil. And stuff that's going on, it's just evil. And you look and it's classified as whatever the children of Israel were into. It wasn't just that they were lazy or that they had just not being spiritual as they ought to. They had actually devolved into evil behavior. And the Lord, what was the result of this? The Lord let them be taken over by the Midianites. Now the Midianites, who were these people? Well, we don't find that the Midianites were ever a great nation or anything. We do find, by the way, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, the Bible says that he was from the land of Midian, but this was the land of Midian down closer, down south, down Gaza way, down by going toward Egypt. So that was a different Midian. But you have seen Midian several times that Moses married a girl from Midian. Remember, Zipporah was from Midian. But this was a different Midian. This Midian was 100 years ago in about 1300 BC. This was taken over by Joshua and the children of Israel as they came in. And then do you remember when we studied Joshua, we would have all of these great stories of these great military campaigns, and then there would be a footnote, but some were allowed to live, and they made them pay taxes, or they made them servants, or whatever. They did not completely wipe out that people group when they were instructed to do so. So now, 100 years later, after Joshua, we have the children of Israel, and as a result of the failure 100 years ago of taking care of business in the right way, what's the result of that in 1169 BC, where we find ourselves in our story tonight? What's the result of that? Well, now it's because the Midianites are now rising up, and they've had 100 years to regroup and reproduce and teach their ways to the next generations. And they weren't a great nation. They didn't have a great king. They didn't have a great leader. They were connected next to Moab. Now the Moabites were a big people with a Moabite king, and nothing good was said about the Moabites. But the Midianites lived near them, and all that the Midianites were known for were being bullies. They were the ones that would stick out their foot and trip you when you went by. They were the ones that would pick on you after school. They were the ones that would steal your lunch money or take your lunch. They were the ones that would pick fights on the playground. They were just bullies. And you guys, I mean, I don't know. Some funny stories come to my mind about being bullied, and maybe an occasion or two when I was the bully, and I feel bad about that. But you understand, like look. In 2022, we've taken that word bully, and anybody that acts up in school, we've made them a bully. Well, I'm talking about some real bullies back in the day that poke you right in the nose, like, right? So, the Midianites, that's all they were known for. They were despised. In Matthew Henry's commentary, which I read today, he said, as a people, they were despised as uncultured and unintelligent. Wow. How about that's like, might as well call them rednecks. No culture and no intelligence and no culture, right? I mean, that's what redneck, now we wear redneck proudly, but we're cultured and hey, we're smart people. We're smart rednecks, okay? But look, that's what they were thought of. No culture. They didn't have the symphony in Moab, the Midian. In Midian, they didn't have an art museum. They didn't have choirs. They didn't have famous painters that came out of there. And then they just didn't care much about learning. And so that's all they were known for, being brutes. And so that's the people. So God says this band of thugs, okay, Israel, you want to do evil in my sight. You want to do your own thing. You want to go your own way. Then here, get a taste of the Midianites for 7 years. Well, you know how that goes. And look at verse 7. And the hand of the Midianites prevailed against Israel because of the Midianites. Now listen to this. These bullies were so bad that they had run people off from their land. They had run people off from their houses. Look, and what did the children of Israel end up having to do in the end of verse 2? What did they end up having to do as a result of these bullies who came in and just like, get out of this house, it's mine now, kind of bullying. What did they do? They escaped to, well, it says the dens which are in the mountains. What do we call those? Caves. Easy. The children of Israel, these are God's people, God's chosen ones, are now hiding in caves. And they can't come out to find something to eat. Why? You come out, you're going to get your nose punched by a Midianite, right? So they're up there, look at this. Look at God's people living in fear and living as cowards. When they had the King of Kings and Lord of Lords on their side, they had the creator of the universe called them his people, and here they're living in caves. But guess what? All the stinkiness that goes along with living in a cave. All right? And that's how God's people are. Look, the prodigal son found himself in a filthy farmyard, right? In the slop. How was this much different than the way they had acted, and they had found themselves living in a nasty swaller of a cave? And so it was, verse 3, that when Israel had sown, now look at this, they would try, when they'd get the time, they'd try to go out and plant them some seeds so that they could have something to eat in these caves. They'd try to go out and hunt something. But look at what happened when in verse 3, as soon as they had planted some crops or sown some seed or got them something to eat, what happened? Then they came up, but they got some help. Not only the Midianites, misery loves company. And here's the interesting thing. Bullies usually aren't bullies alone. They usually run in packs, don't they? They usually have their posses. And in this case, who was their posse? The Amalekites. And the children of the east, they came up against them. So every time that they came up and they'd get a crop growing, then it'd be time to go get that crop. And what happened? The Bible says, look at it. They came in, they camped against them, and they destroyed the increase of the earth. Anything that the earth produced for them, they destroyed it till they came up from Gaza, and they left what? They left how much food for them? None. So these people are what? They're starving, right? Hey, what did God's plan for us? That I will meet all of your needs, right? I've never seen the righteous forsaken or a seed begging for bread. When you live in God's plan, you're going to have your needs met. Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God, his righteousness, all this stuff that you need will be added unto you. Not everything you want necessarily. But look, they left them nothing from the land. They left them no sheep, no ox, they had nothing, no donkeys. For they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers. You know what that means? They came in just as many as the locusts of the earth. And you know what the locusts did? They'd come in and they'd just go across a crop, and that crop would be gone. And that's how the Midianites were doing. Here's these people living in stinky caves. They're outnumbered. They're the people of God, but they're hiding and they're starving. And the enemy, look at this, both they and their camels. Now, why is that important? Because they had modern transportation. The children of Israel were hiding in caves, but the camels, man, the camels could be used for work. And the Midianites and the Amalekites had trained camels for doing the work. And you've seen the camels, the pictures of the camels with all the packs on their backs. I've even here in my phone got a picture of a camel with Miss Wilma on its back. So if y'all hadn't seen that picture, come up to me afterwards. It's great when Miss Wilma went on her trip with her family, and Miss Wilma sitting on the back of that camel. But anyway, the Midianites had the camels and they had everything. So what's the situation look like for the children of Israel at this point? It looks hopeless. It looks like that the best solution might just be to die, to get out of your misery. And that's where these when people feel like there's no way out, that's when these suicidal thoughts creep in, when they feel like there's no hope. But now, they let this thing go on like this for how long did we hear up at the first verse? How long did this situation go like this? 7 years. And you know what? I mean, you'd think by this point you'd have some men of the children of Israel and say, that's enough, man. We may die, but we're going to die trying. At least we're going to try to do something about it. But they didn't. But look, they were, in verse 6, it tells us, they were greatly impoverished. And as a last resort, at the end of verse 6, what did they do? They cried out to the Lord. Well, what should have been the first resort? Cried out to the Lord. Like, right, when you've got nothing left, when the only direction to go is up, and you cried out to the Lord, that's kind of too late in a lot of cases, right? But here it was. But here's the cool thing. They cried out to the Lord, and then secondly, that was the menacing Midianites, and secondly, in verses 7 through 10, is the message of the prophet. Now, in verse 7, look at what happens. It came to pass. What's the next word? And it's very important. W-H-E-N. What's that word? When was it that God was spurred into action? When the children of Israel decide we're going to ask God to help us, right? See, here's the beautiful thing about that. No matter how low we find ourselves or what in position we find ourselves, we cry out to the Lord and he's listening, right? He heard them. He was listening all along. Gary S. Paxton, the guy that wrote Monster Mash, it was a graveyard. He wrote a song. He was there all the time. He was there all the time, waiting patiently in line. He was there all the time. Gary S. Paxton learned the hard way and wrote that song. But guess what? The Midianites, the children of Israel, learned that song the hard way too. He was there all the time. When they cried out to the Lord, then that's when they cried out to the Lord, children, because of the Midianites. They needed help from God, but the beautiful thing was that God had a plan, and that God, verse 8, the word, it starts with that. Because they prayed, that God sent. You see what I mean? God always answers prayer, right? He's waiting for us to pray. He wants us to pray on the front end of a situation, not on the back end of a situation necessarily, even though he'll listen all the time. He's there all the time. But the thing is, he'll answer. And sometimes for our own good, just like us as parents or grandparents, sometimes we'll get a request and the best, most safe answer is no, right? Or sometimes the best, most safe, Poppy, can I have that piece of candy? Yeah, but we're going to eat dinner in about 20 minutes. So I'll tell you what, after dinner, if you've been a good girl, you can have that piece of candy. See, sometimes God says, yeah, I'll give you that, but you need to wait because I've got something else you need to do in the meantime. And God always has our best interest at heart. God always wants us to be like him. And so for whatever it is we're going through, I don't know if any of you watch Tony Evans like I do religiously, but Tony Evans on TV right now is preaching a whole series called On Detours. A detour means you're headed somewhere and then all of a sudden you're off course. Why? Because God's got something he needs to teach you in a detour. So God will always answer, but sometimes it might not be a direct path. Sometimes it might be a detour. So for the children of Israel, they cried unto the Lord. And so he sends, what did God answer? Well, he sends them a preacher. They're like, Lord, that ain't the answer we asked for. We asked you to help us, get us out of this situation. And he sends them a preacher to go around in Israel and preaching. What was his message? Well, let's look at it. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel. This prophet is going around in Israel and he's preaching, and here's the message. Hey, Israel, I brought you up from Egypt. I brought you forth out of bondage. Verse 9, I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians. You know what he's saying? You think these Midianites are all that. The Egyptians, you guys didn't know them 100 years ago, 120 years ago, but let me tell you something. The Egyptians made the Midianites look like Boy Scouts, right? And he's saying, I brought you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and I brought you out of bondage. I delivered you out of the hand of all, verse 9, all that oppressed you, and I drove them out before you, and I gave you their land. I'm the one that gave you the land. What'd you do with it? What kind of steward were you of the land that I gave you? Well, prophet, what are you talking about, man? Go on. We need somebody to encourage us. You're just beating us down. Well, look at verse 10. And I said unto you, I am the Lord. What was the message to Moses at the burning bush? I am. What do you need? I am. What do you need him to be? I am. What was he yesterday? I am. What is he today? I am. What will he be tomorrow? I am. He's a constant I am. Whatever you need. And he said, I am the Lord. And again, now it's important. It's going to come up a little bit later, but notice, you always need to notice the capital O-R-D, which always means Jehovah, right? If it's small case, that just means like a leader or a ruler, okay? Or a teacher, a leader, a master, whatever, a slave master kind of thing. But he said, I am the Lord, which Jehovah, that's the L-O-R-D, your God. Now, what is always, it's been said that there are 365 of these in the scriptures, this pair of words. What's that pair of words? Here's one of them. Fear not. Fear not, right? So he said, look, first thing, you're cowering in these caves. I'm the God. I did all this stuff. So number one, stop being so afraid. Right? You got to know who you belong to. I'm the Lord your God. I am, and that personally, I am your God. Right? So if I am your God, I am not the God of the Midianites, and I didn't do all this stuff for the Midianites. I did all this stuff for you. Therefore, fear not. And fear not the gods of the... But now look, here's one more. This is rough, because... Fear not the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. Well, wait a minute. That should have been your land, right? But now it's their land. But not only, here's the sad part in verse 10. They were living in disobedience, but you have not obeyed my voice. Look, God says, I am the Lord, your God. They had given up lordship. and they had paid a price for giving up lordship. See, if he's not Lord of all, he's not Lord at all, right? So they chose to live in the land of the Midianites, and they chose to let them have their gods and not obey God. So they were living in disobedience, didn't know who they were as God's children, and did not live in the benefits that were offered to them. I think one of the greatest comforting verses of Scripture is in Romans chapter 5. Therefore, being justified by faith, we have. And then there's this whole list in Romans, first few verses of chapter 5 of Romans. We have this. Just read that and that'll bless you. Just read those first 5 verses of Romans 5. See what you have. They had no idea what all they had as being children. He said, I'm the Lord your God, but you've chosen to give up that lordship and live let the Midianites take your land and dwell in their land. But even on all of that, you could have still, hey, you've heard great stories of great Christians that were in distress, but they still served God. They loved God. I went for a little while there where I read everything I could get my hands on. You remember Senator Jeremiah Denton from Alabama? Remember him, how he was shot down as a pilot in Vietnam, and how he was a great man of God. And I read his book about being in that POW camp in the Hanoi Hilton, they would call it, but how they would, and if they were tortured for even speaking, but they would tap Bible verses to each other. How it, when in the worst adverse circumstances, how they would rise up and live for God. They just let it go. They just chose to disobey. Okay, now let's look. So that's the message of the prophet. And thirdly, tonight, finally, I'm going to call this. We're getting to know Gideon, but I'm going to call this Encountering Jesus. Encountering Jesus in verses 11 through 24. 11 through 24. Now, the writer here is not real specific in verse 11. And there came, what's the next word? An angel. I teach out of the King James just because I like to, but I study out of the other. So, read some of those sometimes when you think, go read it in something else to get some clarity. That's fine, but I teach. So when it says, and there came an angel, that's non-specific. A lot of angels, right? There were armies of angels. The God of angel armies is always by my side. There were plenty of angels. He could have called 10,000 angels. So there just came an angel. Well, keep on reading. Look at it. This non-specific angel, and it's kind of cool because what did this angel do? This angel of the Lord, this angel was sent from Jehovah, by the way, that you have that capital L-O-R-D. And he did what? He sat under the tree. What? He found him some shade. And he sat there and he got to watching what was going on, right? So he's sitting there and he's in Ophrah that pertained unto Joash. By the way, there's also another Joash that later would become king of Judah and was a great king. Remember, Joash brought in the treasure and asked everybody to give an offering so that they could repair. He asked everybody to give to the building fund. Joash started the first building fund in a church. And the great king. This is not him, okay? This is way before that one. So and Joash, and so he was an Abizarite, and his son Gideon. You know what Joash the Abizarite was? What a great mighty man he was. Can anybody tell me? I can't tell you either because nobody knows, right? I mean, he wasn't. He's just like, who? Where? In essence, he was a what? Nobody. Regular guy. Ordinary Joe. Regular guy. And his son Gideon. Now, what we do know a couple of things. Look at this from this verse. What would you reckon to be the occupation of Joash and Gideon and their family business? Well, they were threshing what? Wheat by the winepress. So they were agriculturists. They were farmers of at least 2 different kinds of crops. What are the 2 different kinds of crops we can get from this verse? Wheat, and what else did he had to grow to get the wine? Grapes. So at least they're growing wheat and they're growing grapes. Now the Bible is clear the angel sitting over there under the tree, watching this dude hiding down in the wine vat, throwing up the wheat in the air down in the wine vat, letting the breeze take the chaff away and letting the grain fall back down so they can get some grain and maybe can sell it or maybe get enough to feed their family because they're all starving to death, right? So this angel's sitting under the tree watching this. And but the Bible tells us in verse 11 specifically why is he down there in the wine press in the end of verse 11. He's hiding. He's down there hiding, trying to do a little, okay? Now what is the article here? The second word in verse 12. And remember what it was before? And. Now we have a definite article, which is the. Now we're getting specific. The angel of the Lord. Well, now we're honing in on who this might be. Because now we find out that's the angel of the Lord. And this is cool. And the angel of the Lord, after watching him a while, he comes up to him and he said to him, "The Lord is with thee." You down there hiding, looking around, scared for your life. What does the angel of the Lord call him in verse 12? You mighty man of valor. You know what? That should just... Gideon was a mess. What did God see? A mighty man of valor. See, God sees our potential. God doesn't see our failures. God sees what we can be. God sees what he wants us to be. What had he done? The only thing he had conquered by this time was some wheat. He'd conquered maybe some wheat kernels as the only valor he had exhibited. And I can imagine Gideon. You talking to me? Mighty man of valor? Really? Seriously? And Gideon, look at what now Gideon said. Gideon said unto him, now this is important, look. Gideon said unto him, "O my Lord," are all those in caps? No. So does Gideon yet know who he's talking to? He doesn't realize, see, he did not address him as Jehovah. He just addressed him as, "Hey, leader." Or at this point in time, "Hey, I'm going to address you as my Lord right now because you could kill me if you want to. You might be a Midianite." So he said, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Now look at smart mouth Gideon. "Yeah, Lord. Yeah, look at what he says. Yeah, right. If God was with us, then how come all this has happened to us? It's his fault. All this that they've gone through, then why then is this befallen us? And look at this snotty statement. Where's all his miracles?" Man, seriously? You really know who you're talking to? Look, and where's all the miracles? In which our fathers, yeah, they tried to tell us. Didn't the Lord bring us from Egypt? Now, the Lord, by the way, hadn't the prophet just come and told them all of that? Preaching out through his, and did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord, and by the way, he's addressing, he's saying to his Lord, small case letters, didn't Jehovah, well, if he's Jehovah, why doesn't he help me? Have you ever wondered that? If God's really God, doesn't he understand this fix I'm in? If God's really God, why did this happen to me? And we know the answer in this case, what had happened to them. Well, let's move on. We got to go. I'm sure glad I didn't try to teach all 40 verses. And anyway, what happened? Why did in verse 14, and look, and Jehovah looked at him, and he said, what did he ask of him? Did he ask of Gideon to do the miraculous? Did he ask of Gideon to do the impossible? Or what did he ask of Gideon? Hey, go in thy might. Go in the strength that you do have, right? If we give the strength that we do have to God, what will God do with it, right? So he said, look, just go and give what you do have to God. Go give your might. And then, thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have not I? Now, look, let's get into who this angel is. What does he tell him? Have not I sent you? All of this about the Lord, the God, Jehovah. And now he says, have not I sent you? And he said unto him, now he says, oh my Lord, still small cases. He still doesn't believe, right? He still doesn't. But look at what he does. He offers up 3 excuses. Let's look at this quickly. Wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family. So number 1, he gives his family. His family's nobody. Their status, right? He doesn't have the pedigree. He's not from the right line to take the throne. My family is, now he gives them what? My family is poor. What's the next excuse? I don't have enough money to go do. Have you ever thought that? God wanted you to do something, you thought, well, I don't have money to do that. Well, that's what Gideon said. Man, my family's from nobody. And we're from Manasseh. And not only that, our family doesn't have any status. We're from Manasseh. We're poor. We don't have the money to do that. And then the last excuse he offers him, and I am when he says least, what's he mean? I'm the youngest. So he's telling him, I really am nobody. You don't want me. Go ask somebody else. Because I have all these things. And the Lord Jehovah said unto him, surely what? I'll be with thee, and you shall smite the Midianites. And all of those Midianites that are like grasshoppers, with God on your side, what are they going to come off as at the end of verse 16? Just one. That's how you'll. And he said unto them, if now I have found grace. So here's Mr. Gideon now. Yeah. Give me some, prove it. That's what he says. Look in verse 17. Prove it. And he said to him, okay, if I found grace in thy sign, then show me a sign. Hey, what did the Bible say about a wicked generation? They're all looking for what? A sign, right? They're looking for a sign that thou talkest with me. He said, look, don't leave. Verse 18. Don't leave. I'm going to go get you a present. And he said, I'm going to come back, but stay here till I get back. That's what he tells him, verse 18. Don't go anywhere. And Gideon went, and he got ready. Typical Jewish hospitality. He went and got him something to eat, right? I mean, are you seriously? My mom and dad lived in North Miami Beach. They did in a condo. Man, you go visit some of their Jewish friends. You come in there. Oh, you want some kugla? Anything like hospitality, right? Little chicken soup wouldn't hurt. And so they go in there. And so he puts the flesh in a basket. He brings the broth in a pot. Gideon, dude, how long were you gone? Brings the pot of meat out in the broth. And he brought it under the oak tree where the angel was sitting there waiting. And the angel of God, look at verse 20. The angel of God said, take it. Take those unleavened cakes. I want you to lay them on the rock. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to pour out the broth on it. Put all the stuff down there and soak it good with that broth. You know what happens later when we have this king in Israel who's wicked named Ahab, and a prophet Elijah took bullocks and he poured 12 barrels of water on top of it. And then what happens? And then the angel of the Lord put forth the end of his staff in verse 21. It was in his hand and touched the flesh and the unleavened cakes. And what happened? Out of the rock there rose up a fire and consumed the cakes, the unleavened bread, and the angel of the Lord. As soon as that fire, and this is cool. 2 more verses and we're done. As soon as that fire licked all of that stuff up, then what happened? Then Gideon looks around. What happened? He gone. He's gone. And Gideon's like, oh no. Gideon perceived, then he knew who he was talking to, right? But what happened when what was the prevailing thought if a man saw God face to face? He'd be put to death, right? So what's Gideon thinking now? Uh-oh, my goose is cooked too. I'm dead. And Gideon's kind of mumbling to himself. Why? How do we know that? Because where's Jesus now? By the way, that's a Christophany. That was Jesus he was talking to. Where had Jesus gone? He'd gone. And he's mumbling to himself, oh man, I can't believe this. I've seen him face to face. I'm a goner. And even though he couldn't see God, what happened in verse 23? And the Lord said unto him, right? Hey, he didn't see God and didn't think he was there, but God still heard him. He was mumbling in his fear, and God still understood him. And that voice comes back to him in verse 23 and said unto him, peace be unto thee. And what's those 2 words that we talked about a little while ago? Fear not. Hey, that's the same thing that the shepherds were told. And look, and he directly addresses his fear because Jesus knew him better than he knew himself, and Jesus addressed that fear directly. He said, hey, Gideon, don't fear. What's the end of verse 23? You're not gonna die because I got a purpose for you. Then, guess what? Gideon built an altar there unto the Lord. This Gideon, this wisecracking, skeptical Gideon, he built an altar there. And guess what he called it? He was scared to death. He called it Jehovah Shalom, which means the Lord is my peace. Shalom. Hey, Gideon said, the Lord is my peace. Now, God's ready to use him, right? Now God's got his attention. And next week in verse 25, let me just show you this in verse 25. And it came to pass what? How long did Gideon wait to get to work? And we're going to hit that next week. Next week, we're going to pick it up right there. But hey, tonight, an encounter with Jesus. Look, when you meet Jesus, it shouldn't leave you the same. And when Gideon met Jesus and encountered Jesus, it changed him. It changed him. And now God can use him. And now next week we're going to pick it up right there in verse 25. And we're going to go as far as we can go next week as far as God using him. If you would now take your yellow prayer sheet, please, for tonight. Make sure I have mine. Notice that we put on the top, in addition, we put Preacher Carl, but we also put housing and transition on there because of all those things we talked about. They need to find a house, and they need to find it pretty quickly, and they want to be, within close enough proximity to the church to be here in a reasonable amount of time. So please pray for that. Pray for our musicians, do such a great job. Sunday school teachers work hard. Pray for them. Pray for our deacons, a lot of stuff that they have to decide and make decisions on and help lead us as men that we trust to help make decisions. Look under those that are sick. Brother Royce, keep praying for Royce. Pray that his desire and our desire is that God will raise him up so he can be here with us Sunday. So pray for that. And so we hope that he'll be able to be here with us. And just so we can tell him we love him, right? And thank you for what he did for us. And then 1 week after that, Preacher Carl, right? So let me go ahead and mention, we're going to be doing this thing on Gideon for the next several Wednesday nights, but we're going to take the 25th is going to be Canon Kids Night on Wednesday night, okay? So come on that night and show your support for Canon Kids Ministry, but I won't be teaching that night 2 weeks from tonight. That'll be Canon Kids Night. We'll be recognizing our kids. All right? Shut-ins, nursing homes, those of salvation. Again, keep my friend Ed in prayer as he is a babe in Christ. His wife Deb as she is seeking. My sisters and Isabel's mom and dad. Buster is Gloria's brother. Pray for them. First policemen, first responders. Man, every time you see, hey, this afternoon, man, I saw come on the news, something happened, some homicide in Greenville, and I see Greenville County, and I always look for Nate, but it also, like Paul said, I thank God upon every remembrance of you. You know what that caused me to do? Pray for Nate, right there. I see Pickens County, something going on in the news, makes me pray for Jody, right? So pray for those guys. Pray. So you see all those special requests. Please keep praying about Ukraine. Can you believe that was February 24th? He went in there and thought it'd be over in a week. February 24th, and here we are. And so pray for that. Church ministries. I added in there, one thing added in there, worship ministry, and I added in especially our audiovisual team. We appreciate so much. Look, y'all don't have any idea the stuff that has to go on in that room for us to have those screens, for those people to be listening right now online. Dozens and dozens of people join us online every week. And it's been a headache. So I wanted to put audiovisual team. Y'all don't see, when Courtney throws those words up there, Courtney's in there doing it, but somebody's already inputted those, right? That's all behind the scenes stuff. So Pam, thank you and your team and whatever y'all do, you and Chuck. And I wanted them to be recognized right here, okay? And then, all right, anything we need to pray? I've gone a little long. Man, I'm glad I decided to cut it off early tonight. Yes? Thomas is dealing with some stuff, including COVID. Pray for Thomas. I'm going to write that down. Anything else? Oh, wow. Joanne and John Rosina, their house burnt. That's Friends of Pam's. Y'all, I posted, the city of Seneca posted a picture of that homeless camp on fire down there. That's where Bethany and Stephen going every Saturday. And they're going down there, and, they cook out there. And when I talked to Bethany about it, it wasn't about that. When I talked to Bethany about it, this was a case. She said 90% of the people out there are struggling mightily with mental illness, and that's why they live out there. And she said that's what this case was. Somebody decided what the answer was. They got mad and decided they needed to burn down the camp out there. So it messed up a bunch of people in that homeless camp and down there in Seneca. So there's a picture of it. I put it on my Facebook page of that thing burning down there, and you can see where they're all living down there and stuff. So, but they're going down there again this weekend and serving meals and giving some clothes out and tracts and little laundry bags of, little soap and washcloths and some quarters, things like that. So however they can help, and they have spiritual conversations. And they've got them a little Bible study group out there on Sunday nights. So they got 3 or 4 that come and study the Bible with them. So anyway, so that's the No Name Ministry. And so we pray for that. Anything else? All right, Brother David, thank you, brother, for the work you've put in. David Rowland, the last several weeks, months, you and your crew. Ask God's blessings as we go and on these requests tonight.